All right, welcome everybody. This is the K4 users group. I'm going to start with a quick audience poll. So if you could watch the screen, there's plenty of seats up front. You might be able to see the slides a little easier. If you come up closer, feel free to do that. So let's do a quick audience poll, and then we'll introduce Eric, WA6HHQ, to take some common questions and then any others you might have. There is a mic up here I can hand you if you want to come up and ask a question so the folks on the live stream can hear. I'm Bob, N6TV, and let's do a quick show of hands from the audience. First question, anyone here who has owned a K4 for less than 6 months? You're new to the K4, please raise your hand. Whoa, we've got mostly experienced people here. I only see about 3 hands. So you've owned a K4 for more than 6 months. Most of the room. So you guys may find this stuff too basic, but I do have some new stuff at the end you'll see. Of that group, who owns 2 K4s? Smaller number, but there are a few. It's the only way to do remote until we get that box over there. Now, how many in the room do not own a K4, but they're seriously considering a purchase? 1, 2, 3, lots of hands in the room. So maybe you'll get something out of this too. Eric, I'll have plenty to show you. And of course, he's got the booth right across the way in the building room, in room 1, in the building 1. All right, how many of you that have the K4 or want to get a K4 are planning to operate your K4 or a K4 remotely? So quite a few remote users in the room, almost half the room. That surprises me. I only have a little bit about remote in the talk today, so maybe and how many plan to order the K40 remote control head that Eric's got over there? I'd say about a third of the room. Pretty good, maybe a fourth. Finally, how many want to plan to order the VPOD, which is the enhanced tuning knob? It's like a K-Pod, but with the outboard, and it'll work with software. I guess I have one more question. And how many want to order the K4 HD Superhead, the front end? Whoa, more than half of the room, it seems. Eric's happy to see all these things. Come on up here, Eric. And just out of curiosity, anybody who plans to order a brand new KPA 500 or KPA 1500 soon, raise your hand. How many already have a KPA 500 or KPA 1500? Eric, we've what was it, flooded the market? Satisfied the market, there we go. Not a problem. All right, Eric, you're up. So introducing Eric Schwartz, WA6HHQ, the co-founder, along with N6KR of Elecraft. Come on up. And you can use this mic here.
Actually, I'm running out of hands here.
Yeah.
I don't want to close that.
Don't close that.
I need to be able to put this down somewhere.
All right.
Slide that over sideways a little.
Try it here.
Just to.
Yeah, won't be able to face the room, but.
I'll hold it up. That's all fine. I have my water down here. Okay.
So I've got some prepared questions for you. And I just want to remind you that this is live streamed and recorded. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say, you're not under oath, but anything you say can and will be used against you in the forums, and you already know that. So here we go. First of all, when will we be able to get this in our hands if we order now?
Well, that's a good one. I should take a vote and see how many people can guess correctly. But no, this one seriously, one of the nice things with the K40 is we're using the same core software as the K4 to K4 stuff. So we worked out all the early bugs that many months ago. Minor changes for slightly different I/O in here, but not a whole bunch. Internal I/O, talking to the external stuff on the back of the radio. Right now, the determining factor for us is just the long lead time parts. We've nailed most of that, and they're coming in over the next 6 weeks or so. The overall date that we're giving at the moment, and this is pretty confident. It's going to be going to the field testers first, because obviously they want to make sure they catch all that, but we're actually producing production right after they get their units. We're bringing everything in continually. So we'll be shipping starting, it looks like, before the end of July on this. Everything comes in on time. There's no design issues. The final PC boards are out. You know, they're basically all getting fabbed. By the way, everything is fabricated in terms of the sheet metal in the U.S., actually in Silicon Valley, or one facility down in San Luis Obispo does it for us. We have all the circuit board stuffing that takes place in California, as in our design of courses in the US also. So we do all of our own stuff that way. Little things like accessories like microphones and stuff certainly come from offshore, but beyond that, and parts come from all around the world. That's the biggest if right now also on pricing, but
So you're hoping end of July?
hoping end of July or maybe even earlier for the field test.
Start shipping?
Yeah, start shipping. We started taking deposits. How many people have put deposits down in the room here? If you haven't, you can do it online. Just go to our website. It's a $500 deposit. It's refundable, of course. Have to do that. And that helps us to make sure that what we're ordering is sufficient to cover the people for the early adopters, obviously, for you guys.
All right, let's keep it rolling here.
okay,
Next
go ahead.
question. When will the VPOD and VK4 software
Okay, VPOD is after VPOD and VK4. VK4 programmer's working on it now. We're adding a few more features to it and fixing bugs. It's basically working. I've had the VPOD firmware working on a modified K-pod, and I'll digress just for a second on that. For those of you, including you, that want to modify their K-pods, how many K-pods owners do you have? Okay, quite a few. We can run the same software that does CW in the K4.0 and also K4 to K4, the protocol that's sent up there. We can put that in. We already have put it into a K-pod for testing. And there's if you guys, anybody use the outputs on the K-pod that can turn on and off relays or something? I thought so. So you can take this little stereo jack in the back that you could do that with. And if you take the box apart and take 3 transistors off the board, they just stick to your soldering iron when you heat them up, and you bridge across them, that becomes an input. They actually have pull-up resistors inside the PIC processor. I have one working in my booth like this, and I can send with the VK4 stuff, it'll send that protocol up. So the VPOD also has more I/O and stuff, so it's going to take a little bit longer to come out. So you were asking VPOD first, or yeah? So VPOD is probably in the fall time frame here. I want to get the HD board out, and that's in process right now first.
That question's coming up.
Okay.
So VPOD is
In the fall time frame, I think,
end of fall
or earlier.
for Christmas for sure.
I sure hope so. Yeah, that'd be
And
great Christmas.
you don't have a prototype of the VPOD at the booth?
I'm sorry?
No prototype of the VPOD
No,
at the booth?
no, I don't. I have a 3D case back at work that we're doing for it, but it hasn't been.
But it's like a larger K-pod.
Yeah.
When will the HD module be ready to ship?
What? Oh, VK4, the software will be out, gosh, that's going to be out before the end of the summer because the stuff we have on the to-do list is not that long. I've got functional stuff in the booth. I can transmit CW and sideband with that. I'm not doing that here because you probably hear more noise in the background than anything else coming out down the sideband. But that is in pretty good shape, but I have some features that are missing on it right now. We have to get into it, but they're not like big bugs or tough to fix things. So I've got a person working on that right now.
And you can plug an unmodified K-pod into
Oh yeah, it
VK4.
works. It just works as a K-pod
fine.
with all the usual K-pod stuff.
All right,
works.
how about that HD board? I've seen it at the
HD
booth.
board. I have one in the booth. You can actually see it. It's real. This actually has now been fully tested out in the lab also. Just to give you an idea, before I answer time frame, we're getting about, the key thing with the VPOD is giving you better blocking dynamic range. That single signal immunity from guys on field day, verticals on the beach for de-expeditions, your neighbor down the block that runs a kilowatt in the same band. K4 has no problem with different band stuff because the bandpass filters protect you. And even with in-band for field day if you set it up properly. But this gives you, for those weird cases where you need that, over 140 dB of blocking dynamic range. You know, as good or better than the K3S. So it's doing very well. And the IMD dynamic range is in the same range of the K3 and K3S.
And when can we order it?
That one I should have up on the website probably in the next 45 days or so. This one has priority first, and then that's following that. We're right now ordering key long lead time items for production. And that's the determining factor on it. So I'd say August timeframe, maybe if I can get everything in-house in time, we'll start shipping on that. And I'll be taking orders as soon as I have commitments on the final parts that we've ordered. Crystal filters have for a high dynamic range, for IMD dynamic range, they're the weak link left in any system. And so we have the special crystals made that are actually polished better. Think about what they do. They're just vibrating, right? So like a speaker, if you overdrive them, they go into distortion. And that's where your IMD dynamic range issue is. So you want to make sure those are clean so it doesn't get worse, right? So we can't just take off the shelf ones and do that. So
My understanding is there'll be perhaps a menu item so you can turn the HD module
yeah,
on and off.
HD you'll be able to even do it with the macro, so you can assign a key and turn it on and off like a noise blanker if you need to. So if your buddy down the block on 160 or 80 is running 1.5 kilowatts and on the same band, 30 kilohertz from you, yes, you want to hit that on button, and otherwise you don't have to use it. But
So speaking of noise, there's, of course, the spectral subtraction noise reduction that some of the competition has. Folks say that even without that, the noise reduction in other radios can be better than what the K4 has now. So if not SSNR, would you be having any plans to just improve the NR algorithms that are there now?
We're looking at that. That's going to happen after I get the softwares freed up from the current stuff we're releasing. So probably you'll start work on it in the fall timeframe. I can't give you a hard date on it, obviously, but both of those are important for us, so they're not going to go away.
So probably not before Christmas.
No, I don't think so.
This time, okay.
I might surprise you, but I'm not going to. I'd rather surprise you than commit to it.
We'd love to be surprised early.
Yeah.
That never
No, I've got
happens.
the hooks in there, but these are both a lot of work. So.
All right. And adaptive pre-distortion, which is, clean signal initiative. They want us to be super clean on transmit.
Yeah. That's actually, I was referring to both of those when I said that. So about the same time frame starting both of those.
Not by Christmas.
No, I don't think so, but it's in the works I'm planning here for that. We actually built hardware in on the K4 to support that, so it has the feedback path for adaptive stuff. But we committed to get everything else finished first before we did that, because otherwise I'll delay this stuff. I don't want to.
But you're strongly committed to delivering that?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from the audience?
Okay, the fun part.
I guess we don't have a rover mic, so I'll try to repeat it. Lots of questions from the audience. Let me start with N7TS.
K4O, was that compatible with, we will upgrade to HD?
When you
Oh, gosh, yeah. Okay, so the question, oh, go ahead. I can repeat them, Bob. I can hear them fine if you want. So the question was K40, is it compatible with the HD? Yes, because that's on your remote radio. This doesn't care at all. This is like you just took your control panel on your K4 and just moved it halfway across the country or whatever. But this gives you it's the same front panel as the K4. So as you can see, I'm on batteries right now. You can see what it looks like here. I was going to connect to my phone, but the 4G is not strong enough in here to do that. In the booth, actually at dinner last night in the all-you-can-eat sushi place we had great Wi-Fi there, so I was able to get on the air from there and listen and stuff.
Should have contacted someone in Japan.
Yeah. But anyway, it doesn't. Everything you can do on your K4, whatever's in it, it'll let you do it.
Let me give N2Z, Eric.
The cost of the H module, and for those of us who originally ordered the K4 HD, will we be given priority?
The question is, to answer your second question, will the original people that ordered the K4 HD and say maybe you took a K4 or you're still waiting for the HD, but most of them's converted to a K4D, and then we put you on the KHDR4, that's the upgrade list. You're priority for that, absolutely. So everybody, as long as you confirm your order and we come back and say, do you still want it, you'll have priority for that.
And the cost?
It's going to be roughly like going the same upgrade like you did going from a non-D to a D, about $1,000. Everything, including the price of this is the K40, we're quoting about $21.95, the $21.95. That is variable because everything's sourced internationally for raw parts on these things. Even though we assemble everything in California, we buy resistors, capacitors, flat panel displays, everything. There's a good chunk of that comes from offshore, and that's unpredictable right now. So we've got actually initial production of K40. We do have the LCDs embargoed that we bought. We said got them at a decent price, so they're not going to have a surprise. But after I sell the first couple hundred, or watch out, I don't know what's going to happen. Yes, sir.
Would you please comment on the design philosophy behind maintaining an annoying pulse on Pin 8 remote power?
I actually don't have an answer to that. That was something Wayne did.
The question was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll answer. Let me get confusing with two of us here. I can play it back. Yeah, okay. The question was, and this is a K3 also, both the K3 and the K4, to turn them on, you have to pulse a pin remotely on the back on the ACC connector. That's because the way the front panel was designed, when Wayne did that, and we actually had it laid out by someone else, but the basic concept on it, on the K3, and I transferred to the K4 before I caught it, is that panel shuts down the single board computer that connects to the Ethernet. So there's no way I can get a power on Ethernet to do that. I apologize for that. Though you can pulse it or just pull it down and let back up. Bob solves that for us with his little K-on board, and I use an Amazon light switch deal that basically powers my little switching power supply. And when you power that up, the radio comes up. So that's the way we get around it. I apologize for that, but that's how it came about. It was not a conscious design decision on our organization.
Not something you can easily fix in the future.
Not in the future, just because the front panel it's universal for that. So
Front panel turns on.
I got too many of them out there already too.
For the K40, what's the
Okay, the expected battery life in the K40 right now, I think is around 3.5 to 4 hours in that range. It's a 6-cell, 16850? I forget the cells, the standard cells. And when you have it plugged in, if you have a 45-watt USB-C, because we have USB-C power for this, and also if you want an APP, you could do that in the home station. It will charge it at the same time. There's full power delivery negotiation on it, but you have to have a 45-watt charger to run it and the charger at the same time, a 30-watt one just to run it by itself if you aren't using a battery. So if you have a battery in it, you want to have the 45-watt because it'll try to charge it.
And 1 RM?
Okay, N1, where are you? Go ahead.
Remembers me, RM, got it.
The adaptive pre-distortion, are you going to have an internal map to cover the internal 100-watt amp?
Yes,
Okay, so that's going to be.
internal and external, yeah. Yeah, we left the external as a teaser for you. That's why you always saw that jack on the back, so you knew it was in there somewhere. I hope, well, the RF sampler would be just for, a non-Elecraft amplifier. The Elecraft, if 500 doesn't have if you're going to do it with the 500, you need an external sampler for feedback. This is for pre-distortion. If you're going to use the 1500, we built it in.
And it's also built in for the internal.
100-watt amplifier, yes.
Okay, it's about 15 minutes up here. One last question, in the blue shirt in the back.
You guys publish the spec on your adaptive pre-distortion, what the level is, and on adaptive.
Oh, the input versus, I'll certainly, I think it's pretty standard. I forget how many dB down. Is it 60 dB or whatever the most common couplers are, but 60 or I don't have it in front of me, but certainly input distortion, pre-distortion input, the sampler input you're talking about, we will publish that. Sure.
Quick question? All right.
Yeah. Any improvements coming to the DSP filters?
Gosh, those work awfully well right now. I don't think we've not planned any changes to the DSP filters.
Bob Sherwood has mentioned that the rejection is not as good as some of the competitors.
The skirts aren't as sharp.
We can if you're down below.
Yeah, even at 200,
at
it's still
200?
not as sharp, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you really need that. You're going to get more ringing if you do that. That's the trade-off. And that's true. That's true on a lot of them. And also you get more delay through the DSP system when you do that. So it's a standard trade-off on those two. We haven't planned to do that because I haven't had a lot of complaints about it. I mean, you can look at it, but I don't ever have a lot of blow-by. It's a problem for us.
Only Rob Sherwood is talking about it.
Well, that's a lab test. That's fine. I know Rob real well. He does great work. So
Thank you very
Yeah,
much
too.
for everything you do for Elecraft.
yeah. If you have more questions, you know where to find me over in the booth. I'd be glad to talk to you and pull stuff apart and show you. I have an HD board to show you too. Come by and take a look at that. So
Thank you
it's
so
real.
much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. By the way, Eric and I are not related, even though it looks like we might be. Yeah. Three bald heads. There was a lot of glare on that photo. All right. So folks who've seen this on the web, I apologize. There's some repetition from last time, a few enhancements, tried to make the slides a little easy to read. But there is some really valuable stuff at the end. So if you can stay awake, and I'll give you a hint, it has to do with keeping Windows updates from messing everything up. Yeah, it's called Use a Mac. No, it's Windows updates. So these links are all live in the PDF copy that you will see uploaded to my website after the convention. Go to my QRZ.com page as my website. And on there, if you scroll down to presentations, this should be at the top of the list. K4 Tips and Tricks 2025. I'll have the link to my QRZ.com page at the end here. But all of these guys are very, very useful. And even the release notes are where they put stuff that doesn't make it into the manual or programmer's reference yet. And these are all on the Elecraft websites. If you're brand new to a K4, definitely read the introduction. Or if you just plugged in a K4 to a new computer, go back and read that introduction. It tells you how to get the COM ports back and everything else. We have an active K4 groups.io page. Anybody here who is not yet subscribed to it? Okay, just a few folks. I highly recommend subscribing to it. You can't, unfortunately, it's marked as a private group. That was a mistake that somebody set up. So you can't be searched with Google or anything. You have to sign in and use the search box in there. But in there, there's a files area that has the following files listed, including a new Mac OS setup guide by AI6W and the FT8 setup guide by WT8P. And every Sunday at 20 Zulu, we do a interactive problem solving, ask any question about Elecraft or the K4 hosted on Zoom, was started by K8 and you. And he unfortunately couldn't be here today. We want to get a picture, a group picture of everybody who's been on that Zoom chat after this talk over there on that wall. Please gather and I'll get a group shot of everybody for Carl who couldn't make it. So in case you get messed up, you might forget about this. You want to hold down the norm button. It's a knob. It actually acts like a button. Hold it down for a long time. And in the yellow text there, that means hold function. That's kind of universal throughout, except for those buttons on the right. But you do want to always, your filters get messed up. You change bands, you change VFOs. All the filters are different. They save all that stuff per band and per VFO, unfortunately. You just want to normalize things for the current mode. Just hold down that button. There's no way to, right now, to program what norm does. It just does a factory default just for that filter, just for that VFO, just for that band. So you have to repeat it. If you're plugging in headphones to mute the speaker and unplugging headphones to unmute the speaker, you're doing it wrong. You don't need to do that on a K4. By factory default is they program the PF3 button on the front panel to toggle this menu setting, speakers plus phones, between yes and no. So you can leave your headphones plugged in all the time. If you want to listen to speakers, hold down PF3. You don't want to listen to speakers, hold down PF3 again. No reason to do any wear and tear on your headphone jack or your headphone cord. If you do want to use separation, stereo separation or diversity or two-band listening or something like that, plug something into the external speakers jack. Because if you don't, the internal speaker is mono, and you'll get a mix when the internal speaker is on. You turn the speaker off, then you'll get stereo in your headphones. But if you set speakers external to 2 and plug in any stereo plug, doesn't have to have a speaker, into the external speaker jack, then stereo will be maintained whether you have the speakers on or off. And if you just have a mono speaker, just connect one side of the stereo plug, the left side, and which would be the tip connector. So I'm going to cut this one short a little bit. There is built-in help text in the K4 itself. It does have a search feature. You tap the question mark to bring it up, and then you tap the magnifying glass to search. And you'll get a pop-up screen where you can enter a string. In this case, I entered IIR, and it starts highlighting those fields. And those arrows can be used to navigate. But I found it much easier to use the exact same manual on the web. There's a link to it on the K4 manuals page in HTML format. And then you get Control F in any browser and find things that way. You get a little more powerful search. But the built-in manual is there if that's all you have. And there's even this kind of mysterious button that people forget about. What does that do? Well, it makes the help text full screen. It looks like that. And if you want to scroll it, that little symbol on the right, that means a little curly Q and the A, that means turn the VFOA knob. That's what that icon is trying to represent, is use that knob to scroll through the page. And if you hit that button on the left there again, let's see if I got an arrow, this one here, that one will take you out of full screen mode. And very useful to know, like I just touched something on the radio, something changed, I forgot what I touched, hit the question mark, and then tap the last control button, and it should jump into help text to tell you what button or what thing you just changed, menu item, whatever. And then you can figure out, oh yeah, I didn't mean to touch that. The factory default, the way the display comes, I think doesn't look very good. You've got way too much noise in the waterfall. You can't see the weak signals. They're covered up by the band noise. So I have some number of recommendations for optimizing the display. And they're kind of all listed here, and I'll show you that, some screenshots of that. But you might notice that on this screen I have S units on the left. The factory default is decibels, or dBm. So I don't know too many people who say, you're negative 63 dBm here. No, we say you're 10/9. Sounds much better, doesn't it? So you want to see that peak on the display, and therefore I think most folks will want to change that to S units. That's that menu setting I listed there. It's a little obscure. It's called spectrum amplitude units. The default is dBm, and I think most of us probably change it to S units, but maybe I'm wrong. The scale is the vertical scale, how many decibels of space you have at the top. And the factory default is something like 35 dB, and there's a much larger range in signals. So loud signals are going off the top of the page, and weak signals are kind of buried, or too much noise. So I increased that to 80, and you can adjust it as conditions warrant. You tap the display button and then the ref level button, and it should be set to auto in most cases, but you can set it to manual for specialized measuring of things. And the menu setting for auto ref offset is -2, and I think that puts a little too much noise in the display, or maybe too little, I forget right now. But I think I've kind of settled on offset 4. These are kind of my personal recommendations. And as far as the scrolling goes, I'm not a big believer in leaving the cursor in the middle of the screen and shifting, smearing the whole band up and down as you tune. To me, that's like reading a newspaper by holding your head still and moving the newspaper up and down. I don't think we read that way. Of course, we don't read newspapers anymore, do we? Span, I've just settled on kind of about 40 kilohertz on CW. In a contest, I may go narrower because they're so crowded. And about 100 kilohertz span seems to work pretty well on phone. And the good news is you can store those in the quick memories, and then you don't have to keep messing with the span knob. And the RIT knob, when you're not using RIT, has a couple of useful functions you can assign to it. And I like to use it to shift the center of the center of the display, so I can just keep the band edge on the left. And that's the menu RIT knob alternate function. Once you get everything set up and everything looks just perfect, double tap that A to B button. What does that do? That's copy all. Just single tap just copies the frequency. If you double tap, it copies the mode, the scope settings, everything else. So then when you tap the A, B button to swap between two frequencies, the display, if B is still in the same part of the band, won't shift around and jump all over the place on you. So just reviewing that real quick, you tap the display button. There's the scale. If it's in yellow, what do? You hold it down to get to the scale. And then the scale number pops up, and then you've got that twist the A knob to adjust the scale. And here's where I've set it to 80 dB. You have to keep tapping this button here in the display menu, single tap, to cycle through the various scrolling modes. There's fixed 1, which does a whole screen. Fixed 2, I've settled on, does a half screen scrolling. And I think I like the cursor moving and only the band moving when I get to the edge. And then it gives me some context, because if I want to go back the other way, it doesn't jump. So I think fixed 2 is a good one to use. And you, of course, can adjust the span by a similar way. You rotate the knob, and that gives you the 40 kilohertz or 100 kilohertz or what you want. And here's the menu item. I mentioned the RIT knob alternate function. I think the default is none. The other option besides pan center and pan span, which would be like a zoom in function, is VFO coarse if you want to use the RIT as a coarse tuning knob. And of course, you tap menu, then you unlock to scroll down, then you unlock the little icon there and tap there, and you can change the function by rotating the knob. And the little curly Q arrow in the lower right corner there, that's your dismiss, like I'm done. And you can tap that. And then when you're all done, you use the RIT knob. Kind of funny, on the panel it says OFS for offset, but everywhere else it's called the RIT knob. All right. Quick memories are really helpful. The per band quick memories, they're not on other radios. If you haven't used them yet, it's really worth learning how to do them. And every quick memory is per band, and you tap the store button first and then the M1 button to save it. When it saves your scope settings, your filter, the mode, everything, and frequency for both VFOs. And then if you hit recall in the M1, then it resets all that stuff. So you get all the stuff that you had set up perfectly can come right back, but it is per band and per 4 memories. So I just use the 4 memories for the 4 different modes that we operate. I just listed them in order of they were invented. The CW first, then sideband. Maybe RTTY came second, but anyway, not too many people on RTTY these days outside of contests. So learn to use the per band quick memories. Don't confuse them with the band stack. That's something completely different and not nearly as useful as the quick memories. All right. The factory default is all antennas are available, and that's not a good thing because most of us don't plug 3 antennas into the K4. You tap the antenna button, and you're going to not do what you want. So you tap the TX button down there, and then antenna configuration. And that's where you can uncheck all. And if you just have one antenna connector or maybe just an amplifier, just check one box, the ANT1 box, and don't check ANT2 and ANT3. Then when you tap the antenna button, it'll either do nothing if you only have one TX antenna, or it'll cycle through whatever check boxes you have checked. What if I want to label my antennas? You notice I had main on one, I have dummy load on 2, and so I wanted to name antenna 2. And the way you do that is you go ahead and tap the main RX button. I'm sorry, you tap the receive antenna button on the K4. And if it switches antennas, well, then you have to do another thing. But by default from the factory is when you tap RX antenna, this set of buttons comes up that says which antenna do you want to pick. And that's the only place you can rename your antennas for the display at the top. So you have to hold down that button in yellow, and then you'll get a pop-up keyboard where you can type in the name. And then you have to tap that enter key to save it. Some people hit the X at the top, that doesn't save it, that cancels. So hit the enter key to save it. By the way, anytime you see this keyboard on your display and you don't want to touch the screen because it's real cumbersome to type, especially when you're doing macros, plug in a USB keyboard, any USB keyboard, and start typing. That's all you have to do, especially if you're doing a lot of labeling and naming and entering macros. Plug a USB keyboard into the K4 temporarily and do it that way. Then after you got all your antennas named, go back into the main RX and antenna config buttons and select use subset. And you only want to select the antennas that you have available. And a lot of people make the mistake of checking antenna 1 and equal TX antenna when all they have is antenna 1. And it's kind of dumb the way the system works. Every time you press the receive antenna button, it just cycles through these checkboxes in sequence. So if you have equal TX antenna and antenna 1 both checked, then you tap RX antenna and nothing happens. Why? Because it jumped from that one to that one. It just went through a cycle and there were duplicates. So in most cases, if you just have antenna 1 and maybe a couple of receive antenna ports, just check those 3 boxes. But don't forget, you also have to do the same thing on the subreceiver. They're completely independent settings. You tap sub RX and then antenna config for the sub RX. When you see that BSET symbol at the top, that means you're working on the subreceiver setting the B. And I would make them identical. And once you do that, all you have to do is tap the RX antenna button. And as long as use subset is selected, it'll just cycle through all your receive antennas. And you can hold it down if you want to cycle just the subreceiver antenna. And if you say, whoops, I forgot to name my antennas, how do I get it back? You tap main RX and antenna config, and then select display all again. And then when you tap the receive antenna button, you'll get that prompt where you can enter the names of your antenna and rename them. People do this once, they change from Yagi to quad or something, and they forgot, how do I rename my antennas? You have to go back to display all mode. This big RX antenna thing here is trying to tell you this is what the RX antenna switch will do. They call them switches. Physical buttons on the radio they call switches, and buttons on the screen they call buttons for terminology. And so the radio always displays what antenna each receiver is using. The main receiver on the left. You don't have to have dual pan mode like I have here. It's still, these are displayed whether you have dual pan mode or single pan mode. People think I have to turn on the second pan to see the subreceiver. You don't. The VFOs are in both. This is the antenna, the transmit antenna in orange in the middle, and the subreceiver antenna on the right. Now you may notice that I've got the subreceiver on a higher band than VFO-A, which is normally not going to work. But if your subreceiver is using a different antenna, then you can put the subreceiver on any band you like. But if they're listening to the same antenna, the transmit antenna, well, the transmit antenna has band pass filters or low pass filters, and you'll get a big warning if you try to turn on the subreceiver when it's set like this. It says subreceiver frequency too high, and band pass filter or low pass filter would not allow you to hear anything. So I usually recommend setting the menu VFO-B different band to no, and then both VFOs are always on the same band. Folks who do like to monitor multiple bands, you have to always put the lower band on if you just have one antenna. But there's a little mystery. Here's a bonus item you guys haven't seen talked about before. What is that? Well, that's the clock and a status area. It's called the status area, and people don't realize that the status area is a button. You can actually tap the clock, And when you do that, you'll get a whole new set of buttons that say, well, what do you want to see in the status area? And I think a default is TX param, and it has, the voltage and stuff. But this last button on the right here, time and TX, is the one that I was using before. So it just displays the time, not the date. And it shows you when you transmit your watts and your SWR. And there's a lot of other options. This signal level thing is an audio meter. You can actually zero it. That's kind of what you see displayed here is the audio level after I zeroed it. And then if you tune in a signal, it'll show you how much audio output you're getting. But it's not a signal level in decibels, it's the audio output level. So you generally want to turn AGC off if you're trying to get precise numbers of dB measured. All param gives you a big long screen. You can scroll with the VFO knob to show you all your voltages and temperatures. And this edit ID button down here, that's where you can put in your call sign. If you want your call sign displayed for your screenshots or whatever, you can edit your call sign in with this edit ID button and then select ID and time in the status area. And you'll see time at the bottom and your call sign at the top. So remember, the clock button is a button and it's the status display. So this dialog for the display kind of confuses people a little bit. There are buttons on the top left there. These here tell you what are you changing. So if I just want to change, for example, the waterfall height on the external monitor, I want to see more waterfall there, but I want like 50-50 waterfall on the LCD. Well, you can tap LCD, hold down this waterfall button here, and then turn the knob to adjust that to 50%. And then you tap EXT, and you can separately set the waterfall height on the external monitor. If you want to do something that applies to both A and B, you can hit this ampersand. Something that applies to both the internal and external displays, you can tap this ampersand. Not all of these things apply independently to both receivers. I don't remember the entire list. NB is the waterfall noise blanker. It eliminates snow from the waterfall, and there's a couple of modes of that. I personally don't use the noise blanker on the waterfall. Oops, I want to see the, I want to see everything. I want to see the noise. Here's a tip for copying weak signals on CW when you want to really pull them out, and that is to set the APF bandwidth. You tap main RX and then the APF bandwidth. Set it to about 50 hertz. I think the factory default is 30. They used to have a bug that it would reset it to 30 every time you restarted the K4. Now or installed a firmware update. Now it remembers 50 hertz, but it's still, unfortunately, per band per VFO. So you have to kind of set your APF on all of them. You can do it with one big long macro string. But that really pulls out the weak signals. But one other tip there, your pitch control, the center of your CW passband should be a multiple of 50 hertz. 450 hertz, 500 hertz, 550 hertz. The default, factory default is 600 hertz. I think that's kind of unpleasant to listen to, so I changed the pitch control down to 450 when I want to use the APF peaking filter. There's other bandwidths, 30 and 150. 50 seems to be very helpful. And how do you get the APF on? Well, unfortunately, it's not real convenient. You have to hold down the filter button to turn the APF on and off. But there's these macro strings you can just program into a K-pod switch or use in your logging software to just turn on the audio peaking filter. AP/ means toggle it from current state to the other state. AP $ means do it on the subreceiver, so I'm doing it for both at the same time. All right, Windows. And this is where some important things happen. A lot of people make the mistake of plugging their K4 into a different USB port, and all of a sudden everything changed. The sound card's different, the COM port's different, everything changed. Why does that happen? Well, Windows is pretty strict about where you plug in USB devices. It goes by internal hub number, and so if you plugged it into another port on the same hub, then it's probably not going to renumber everything. But internally, the PC may have USB 2.0 hubs, a separate USB 3.0 hub, and as you move that cable around, it's going to end up with a different COM port number, and it's all going to reset all the things to the factory default. And the factory default is what you see here, I mean the Windows default, which is the serial enumerator is checked in the advanced settings in Device Manager for that COM port. What does that mean? It means look for a mouse that's connected to the serial port. Well, how many people connect mouse to a serial port? So you want to uncheck that box every time you plug in any FTDI device, including a KP1500, though it's not as critical there. And you also don't want it to look for a dial-up modem every time you plug in a new device. So you'll want to check the box, disable dial modem control at startup. What does this fix? If you've turned on the keying feature of the K4, you ever power up a K4 or power up your PC, reboot your PC, and you hear dot, 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 dot. What is that? Yeah, there it is. That's because these options were set back to the default. A Windows update might change them back to default, or moving the USB cable, adding a hub, moving the USB cables to a different hub. So our recommendation is, once you get the K4 all working, the COM port set, the sound card set, always plug that USB cable into the same port on your PC. And if you're trying to debug things and you want to unplug a USB cable and see what COM ports go away, do it at the back of the radio, because it's too hard to figure out which COM port on my PC is the radio. Go to the back of the radio and pull it out there, and then you'll see. Once you've got those options set, you have this convenient feature of being able to send CW or PTT over the USB cable. You don't need a WIN key. You can still use the paddles, of course, but you can have computer-generated CW working on these pins, and this applies to N3FJP software, which didn't work so well with the K3 because it needs its own COM port for CW. It works with N1MM, DXlog.net, FLDigi. All these programs can send decent CW using those virtual pins on the USB cable, and I like that feature very much. In N1MM contest software, any here use the N1MM contest software sometimes? Okay. People may not realize that it can talk to the K4 by TCP/IP, by Ethernet cable. It can use the COM ports, but you may want to use the COM ports for some other program at the same time. So in N1MM, you can select the port type, not just COM, but you can select TCP. And when you put in TCP, you don't have to put in the hard-coded IP address assigned to your K4. You can just put in the serial number. And in most networks, it will find the K4 that way by its host name, it's called, K4-SN, and your 5-digit K4 serial number, .local, and then :9200. 9200 is the port number that the software can talk to locally, not remotely. It's not password protected or anything. And then you can do your CW keying on one of the virtual COM ports. Can't do that over the Ethernet except by sending KY commands. But don't forget to check this CW other box first, then hit the set button, and then you can say, I want to do CW on DTR and PTT on RTS. Sideband operating tips. The factory default is flat equalization, and that sounds pretty bad. So most microphones are wide range, too bassy for punching through a pileup. So you tap the TX button and then the TX EQ button, and then you get a graphic equalizer. And this is what I recommend to start with for most wide microphones, like a typical PC mic, an Electret mic, maybe the MH4. And you want to hear what it sounds like, you can just tap this flat button on the right, and it toggles between all your settings. But don't turn off the radio, then it'll go back to flat. But as long as you don't turn off the radio, you can tap that flat button on the right there as much as you want. It'll toggle between flat mode and equalize mode, and you can listen to how it sounds in the monitor. I recommend using voice memories to hear how you sound, because if you talk and listen at the same time, the sound comes through your head and it doesn't quite sound the same. So record a voice memory, which is always recorded unprocessed, unequalized in the current firmware. And then when you play it back, you can play with the equalization and the processing and listen to the monitor. And I've listened on the air and also to the monitor at the same time. They sound almost virtually identical, unless you're getting a bunch of RF arcing in your antenna or something. So that's a setting. I have one little error here. This graphic was a little old. I've decided to bump up this last band pass here, this 3200 hertz, which is technically above the pass band, but I bumped that up to 5. And the rest are set. You can just send this one command, and I'll show you a neat tool for sending commands like this to the K4, and it'll reset everything to that as a starting point. So I'd try that. So how do you record a voice memory? You tap the record button, not the recall button. People get mixed up with that, but this is the record button right here. And then you tap the key you want to record the voice memory in, and as soon as tap that button, start talking. Otherwise, there'll be a gap at the beginning of your voice memory. And then as soon as you stop talking, tap that M1 button again, and that'll save it. You'll get prompts on the screen, but that's too slow to tap the screen. Just use the buttons to record things. And once they're recorded, you can just tap the button once to play it back. You can turn on TX test mode by holding down the XBit button. That is kind of unique to the K4 and K3. It is a way of testing everything on the radio, including the PTT output, without transmitting any RF. And that is a useful feature, especially for listening to your voice messages without transmitting anything on the air. And then there's these handy commands. You get 2 banks of 4 messages or 8 total messages. And you change the bank with holding down this record button. It says bank. That means swap between memory bank 1 and memory bank 2, and there's a display that shows that. Spectrum display. People say, I want to put the call signs in my screen on the K4. Well, they're not going to do that for you on the K4. That's too involved. But when programs like N1MM and some others, you can select windows. As long as you're connected to the K4 by Ethernet in N1MM, you can select window and then spectrum display, and it will put on your PC screen in N1MM this PAN adapter, and you get to choose which ones you want. And it'll, if you're connected to the cluster in your software, it'll start labeling all the call signs where they are. And how do I set this up? Well, all you have to do is connect that Ethernet connection like I showed before with the IP address or the host name. This little button here on the right, if you tap that, you get the settings screen. Spectrum source is not an external SDR. You actually have to say external wideband flex. I'm not sure what WB stands for. But flex, you select that one, and you can pick radio 1 pan A or radio 2 pan A or whatever you want to monitor. And there's some other options over here for which frequency you want displayed. And it will follow your frequency as you change. But it somewhat follows the span of the K4. It's kind of fixed that way. Yes, sir. Yes, the question was, can you simultaneously connect by TCP and serial port in one program? And yes, the answer is they all work independently. Not only that, you can have multiple programs connecting, like WSJT can connect by TCP port as well. I'm about to show you that. And so you can have everybody sharing the same TCP port, and there's no conflicts. Everybody gets what they need. So it's actually using a different port number. I think it's 9201 or 9202 to stream this data. So it's a separate, TCP IP port, but it figures that out. It just adds 1 to 9200 or something and gets to the right port and gets to the data that way. But yeah, there's no problem using all 3 serial ports of the K4 and as many TCP IP connections as you like at the same time. Unlike the K3, which was very restricted that way. So most guys just want to operate FT8 these days. That's where most of the QSOs are being made. And it too, you can use COM port for rig control, but you can also just, where it says serial port, you can just type in the host name and IP address, or IP address and port number in WSJT or JTDX, and all of a sudden you're talking to the radio by TCP IP. And in that case, you have to generally use PTT via CAT. My preference is PTT via RTS, but that's just because I think it's a little more reliable. If a command gets lost, it won't keep the radio keyed. But you always want to use the test CAT and test PTT buttons in these to make sure everything is working. And I recommend if you are using split equal fake it these days, sometimes the commands to put the radio in split are kind of slow and they don't always work and they don't always put the VFO in data mode for you. So if you use split equal fake it, then it just keeps VFO A as your transmit VFO and it offsets it during TX cycles to compensate and keep your audio pitch in the middle of the TX passband where there'll be the minimum distortion. You can set the audio I/O using the devices in WSJT to the USB audio codecs. I like to number them TX audio and RX audio using the sound control panel so I know which is which, but generally they only let you pick one. Leave the power slider in both programs set to the maximum and adjust the level using the menu. That should produce minimum distortion. How do you adjust the transmit level? You tap TX and line in. Make sure that sound card is highlighted in white. That means it's selected. People say there's no audio. Well, you probably selected and line in jack, which is separate and nothing plugged in there. from a lot of customers that I helped, just setting the level of 36 and all the sliders to max. When they transmit the tune button in WSJT, they'll say ALC, get right to hash mark 5, and we're all set. Folks with Dell PCs, some have no problems, but others have had terrible problems getting WSJT to work. The only way I fixed it was to run the services, go to the services menu of Windows, and disable the Waves audio services. You right-click stop, and then right-click properties disable, and then reboot the PC, and then all of a sudden all the sound stuff works. What's the Waves audio service? It's some kind of enhanced noise canceling thing for Zoom calls or something. You really don't want it active for WSJT. And that's the other important thing, is you really don't want Windows to use your K4 sound card. You want only WSJT or JTDX or your logging software to use it. And you don't want Windows sounds and beeps and dings to use the K4 sound card. And it'll happen by default. So you never want to leave the USB audio codec as the Windows default sound card. How do I know what the Windows default sound card is? It's got these little green marks. When you run the sound control panel, the easiest way to get to it is just to run this mmsys.cpl that I showed here. And you're going to see, as soon as you plug in a brand new K4, and this is in the new owner setup checklist, but people forget about it because they move stuff around and all of a sudden nothing works anymore. Windows puts these little green marks. The little telephone icon here means that's the default communications device for Windows. And over here on this communications tab, you'll see it mutes that thing. That's the last thing you want. Also, you don't want the speaker's device of the K4 USB audio codec to be your default either. You want to pick, these are disabled in this picture I got a screenshot of, but you want to enable the speakers in your PC to be used by Windows. So you click on that and then hit the Set Default button. That moves all the green marks to your PC's internal speaker, and then Windows will hopefully leave your K4 USB audio codec alone. But a lot of people say it was working last night, Windows did an update, and now it went back and used the K4. So always check the sound control panel if you're having trouble with WSJT. And here's probably the most valuable slide of the day. So if you're asleep, please wake up now. This is really helpful. I've just learned about this recently. And it is a way to prevent Windows updates from messing with your sound cards and COM ports. First, never run a device driver updater program that somebody tries to sell you. They will install the wrong versions of the FTDI device drivers. You don't want to do that. If it happens to you, you can delete those device drivers and go back to the right ones. But if you run, and I haven't figured out an easy way to get to this dialog except by typing in the Windows taskbar search box, Advanced System Settings. And it ends up with this Advanced tab being highlighted, but then you go over one and click on this Hardware tab. And then there's a button down here that says Device Installation Settings. Choose whether Windows downloads manufacturers, apps, and custom icons available for your devices. That means, do you want Windows Update to mess with your sound cards? They ask you the same question again when you click that button. The default is yes, recommended. My recommendation, once you get everything working, is click no. And it says your device might not work as expected. If it doesn't, then I can go back and put yes and do a Windows update. But chances are you don't want any Windows updates messing with your devices. Click that button no, click Save Changes. Hopefully a Windows update won't mess things up. It's still possible, however, that if you leave WSJT up running all night to just monitor what was heard on the band while you were sleeping, and then a Windows update happens overnight and they restart your computer, all bets are off. So I wouldn't recommend doing things that way. Here's a really easy use program. I used to tell people to use Telnet or PuTTY or something like that to send commands to the radio, especially if you want to program some macros. This program by NF7Z is kind of underrated. There's also NK7Z, who's got a similar program. It's more fancy and has memory buttons and stuff for programming macros. But if you just want to test a few commands, and you shouldn't be afraid of the commands, they're very useful to program into KBOD switches and other functions on the K4. You can just type the serial number in this field. I've got an IP address there, but it doesn't need that. You can just type in 3-digit serial number of your K4 or 4 digits. You don't need the leading zeros. It just figures out what you meant. So if you just type in the serial number of your K4 and hit connect, it will connect to that. And it'll remember that connection. The next time you start the program, it'll auto-connect and you don't have to do anything. And down here, you can just type in a string of commands, and not just one, but any string of them, and click Enter Macro, and then you'll get a feedback at the bottom. You get a feedback at the bottom that in green, that's what the radio responded with. So if you're getting, and not only that, it says here in the fine print, up and down keys bring back your prior commands. So if you make a typo, it's like, oh, that didn't work, just hit up arrow, and then you can edit the command string and test it all out. And you can add the delay commands that are needed sometimes. Great little tool, and the link to his page, you can just Google NF7Z macro tester, or when this PDF is uploaded, this will be a hyperlink. You can just click on to go right to the right page. MacroMaster's fancier, lets you save buttons, has some pre-programmed things. Great tool at macro tester. So here's an example of programming a macro. This button, people don't realize the remote antenna button, you're holding down the antenna switch, is like a fifth function key. You have PF1 through 4. They're already programmed by the factory to some not very useful settings. But once you run out of those, if you don't have a K-pod, well, you've got this fifth button here, the remote antenna button. And when the auto ref level is on, you may find sometimes a static crash comes through or a big loud signal, and all of a sudden the waterfall looks way too noisy or way too dark. Even though you have auto ref enabled, it's going to take a while before it averages out and then refreshes the screen. Or sometimes you just turn on the subreceiver and its reference level is all messed up and not correct. Kind of a bug in the system, but you can easily overcome it. Program this button or any button you like to do the following commands. So how do we program our first macro? Again, you have these function keys F1 through F8 on the screen that you can program. The one tap is the white, the yellow is hold. I've got a few programmed and labeled there, and I haven't programmed 6, 7, and 8 in this picture. But you tap the function, and then you tap hold. You hold macros. It's in yellow. If you just tap it, you get a screen capture. But if you hold it down, it brings up the macro dialog. And then you scroll down to which button you want to program. In this case, the remote antenna switch is listed after F1 through F8, and the PF keys and the K-pod switches come next in the list. And here's where people make the biggest mistake. You got to enter the command in the right-hand column, and the middle column here is labels on the buttons if they're on the screen, or it's a self-documentation of what this command does. So my recommendation is put in the label first, then you're sure you got the command in the right place, because there's no vertical bars telling you where to tap. But you got to tap there just to set the label. Again, the keyboard pops up, a recommendation. Use a USB keyboard to type this stuff. It's too hard to do it on the screen. Then you tap enter to save it, and then you go ahead and tap the next column, and this is where you put in the magic command. And in this case, the magic command, AR1, means automatic refresh. Refresh the auto ref now, do it now, and clean up my waterfall display. Tap enter, and it saves it. It's kind of a long list of how I've programmed some of my macros. You see that auto ref offset button programmed at the top. I use the K-pod switches. They're very handy for stuff that takes too long on the K4. For example, you need to double tap to copy all, or you want to take an error log on a USB stick. Something's going wrong. You want Elecraft to see the log file. This log command right here, very useful to have. I put it on the #1 K-pod switch with a long hold. And if a USB stick is connected, it captures an error log, and then you can send it off to Elecraft support. I've found it very handy to make screenshots. Please, folks, when you're posting to the group for asking for help, always try to provide a screenshot. You don't need the whole external monitor screenshot unless it's something related to that. But it should be just the LCD, and that's what the SS0 command does, is just screenshot the LCD and ignore the external monitor. And then SS1 is a screenshot for the external. I like having in the lower left corner that quick button, function key 4, tap, which toggles that audio peaking filter on and off that I mentioned before. If I hold it down, it turns the subreceiver on and off. And you may have noticed that when you tap the AB button on the radio, it's very slow to swap VFOs. Too slow for contesting SO2V style 2 VFOs. This command AB2 is a fast swap. It just swaps the VFO frequencies, not the not the filters, nothing else, just not the mode even. It just swaps the two VFO frequencies. So that way I have an instant AB swap, and that's the AB2 command, and that's what that's doing there. And then I've overloaded these, so if I hold them down to a log, they still do the same thing, turning off the RIT and turning on the RIT. So this is a new part of the talk, talking about connecting a KPA 500 or a KPA 1500. A lot of folks don't really understand how this works, so I want to educate folks. There's a menu setting that's off by default, and it's called per band power, and I've highlighted it here. I recommend setting that to yes, even if you're using a non-Elecraft amplifier, because each amplifier, especially the solid-state ones, they need a different drive power on every band. And if you do it this way, the K4 will remember what drive power to use on every band. And if you're connected to an Elecraft amp by a proper aux cable, then it detects when that amp goes into operate or standby. So you want to put the amp in operate first, and it'll remember that setting for what power level you want to use in operate mode. And then you want to set the drive. I've seen people make the mistake of they set the drive to 20 watts, and then they put the amp in operate in that order. Well, now all of a sudden, the power says 5 watts. Why did that happen? Because it remembers two settings, one for when the amp is in operate and one for the amp is in standby, and the default factory is 5 watts, so in an operate mode. So don't forget to turn the amp to operate first. This is with the Elecraft amps, then adjust the power, then the K4. Remember it per band. So if you need different drive level on every band for your amp, then this is the option to use. Set that to yes. If you're using an Elecraft amp, they have very fast switching, and it's almost a little too switching, and the people have said the QSK is kind of unpleasant. There's this loud pop by here when I go back to receive. They added this option here. Why is that happening? A lot of amps will hold their TX relay closed longer than the radio requests it, because there's some radios like the infamous IC, what is it, 706, that have this RF tail. They unkey the amplifier and they're still transmitting RF. That's hot switching. So some amplifiers, to overcome that, they hold their relay, or in the case of Elecraft amps, their pin diodes closed and in a transmit state, no audio, a little longer than requested. But the radio comes back to receive right away. Then the amp unkeys and you hear this big loud pop, because there's a sudden spike in RF input to the receiver. That's what this unkey to receive setting does. The default is 0. You should leave it at 0 if you're not keying an amplifier. But for almost every amp that you want to key, I would increase that until you hear the loud pop go away when you unkey the radio. And the TX delay, 5 milliseconds is fine for Elecraft solid-state amps. If you have a PGXL, set it to the max, 25 milliseconds. They require 25 milliseconds of PTT lead time. Otherwise, you get RF early warnings out of the Flex Power Genius amplifier. So here's the summary of all the tips that you saw today, just to review. There's one bonus item coming next. But just to review, the norm switch to get your filters right, using the speakers plus phones button to mute your speakers instead of plugging and unplugging headphones. You searching the manual, STFM I like to say, and especially the one on the web. Get the scale and span of your scope set correctly, and use those per band quick memories. Get your antenna configuration right, so those buttons cycle one antenna at a time and there's no dupes. And you can use the display menu to make the scope look better. There's some peaking functions and others in the display I didn't go over. You can use the APF to hear those weak CW signals. And of course, you can set up the FTDI properties to prevent unwanted keying, and then you can do keying by DTR. Get that equalization good for maximum punch, and use the voice memories in the radio that sound better than using an external sound card, always. And use the N1MM spectrum display, if you like. No green marks on the USB audio codecs. It's like most of my time is spent helping people with FT8. It used to work, now it doesn't. What do I do? Okay, check that sound control panel, check all the settings, make sure the power knob isn't at 0, make sure enhancements are not enabled, make sure you've got TX line in selected correctly, and block those Windows updates to your device drivers. And don't be afraid of K4 macros. They're really helpful for doing stuff like, I want a button that does this. You can do that. And if you're using a linear amplifier, enable the per band power and the delay settings. So here's one bonus tip for you. If you do have an Elecraft KPA 1500, a lot of folks don't realize that it has some nice features when connected to the K4. If you set the radio type to K4, and if you don't see K4 in the list, this is the KPA 1500 menu on the left here. If you don't see radio type K4 in the list, it means your KPA 1500 firmware is out of date. Update it to the production model 2.67 and you'll see radio type K4 and it'll track the K4 better. There's an option in the menu, I think it's on by default, which is ATU XCVR key. What does that mean? It means when I use the ATU button to start a tune cycle, it'll key the radio for me so I don't have to hold down a straight key or go to RIDI mode and go to XMIT like you did with some, Yaesu rig or something that doesn't have a tune button. Don't have to do any of that when you have the Elecraft amp and an Elecraft K4 or K3. You just tap the tune button on the amp. I showed a picture here of, I kind of zoomed in on it, of where the tune button is, ATU tune it's called. And you tap that, we hold it down to enable the ATU, that's what lights up the in light. And then if you just tap that button, it's gonna, you don't have to change modes on the radio, it's just gonna key the radio, but how much power is it gonna give? Well, it's all set by this menu item in the Elecraft K4. Tune LP, low power tune. If you set it to 20 watts, this thing sends a command to the radio, give me the low power tune power output, and I'll run my tuning cycle. 20 to 25 watts is plenty for the 1500. Even if it's in operate mode, it temporarily goes to itself to standby, tells the radio to give me 20 watts of carrier, finds the match, goes back to operate, one tap. Repeat that on all the segments. The segments are listed in the 1500 manual. And now your 1500 is programmed. One thing I forgot to mention right there at the top, people don't realize, I can just go directly to any band I want by tapping the band buttons on the amplifier. That moves the radio to the same band. If people think, well, I have to change bands on the radio. I mean, I have to tap the band button and then I have to pick a band on this LCD. You can go direct to any band you want by using the band buttons on the amplifier if you got the radio menu set right and you have the right aux cable. All right, here's a list of references. Don't forget to use the Elecraft K4 search box. The groups page has a search box. Reminder, for those who have participated in the Zoom call, we'd like to get a photo of everybody at the left side of the room. There's one more guy who is going to talk here today, K4SV, and then we'll get the photo. And now I can take quick questions from the audience. Whoa, my goodness, a whole bunch. Let's start way in the back of the blue shirt there.
So on number 5 there, sometimes I'll be working in FTA or something.
Number 5? Tip 5, okay.
Maybe I'm working FTA or CW or something, and I'll get a spot for a sideband signal somewhere, and I click on that, and change the frequency over there, but the delays are all wrong, the filters are all wrong. If I use those M buttons, it changes the frequency.
Yeah. No, there's the downside of the quick memory buttons is that they change the mode and the frequency as well. And so what I would recommend, if for whatever you're clicking on, whatever software you're using, it's supposed to send commands to the radio to put the radio in SSB mode, which will switch the filters to the SSB filters. And then when you want to go back to the FT8 frequency, well, you can just click on WSJT to do it, or you can hit recall in M1 and go back to recall in M4, I guess, to go back to the FT8 frequency. But whatever logging program you're clicking on, whatever band map, if it's not changing the mode of the radio to the mode of the spot that you clicked on, then it's not set up right. And you have to teach it the band segments where phone is, where CW is. What program? So the pan adapter will jump, it will, yeah, it'll say zoomed or whatever. The span will not change. The span is not per mode. The filters are per mode, but not the span. Okay, let's go this side of the room.
Sometimes when I go from vehicle A to vehicle B, I want to catch another station on the track test. When I touch, go back to my span changed to 10 kilohertz all the way to 100 kilohertz. We have once in a while, random.
Okay.
Notes about this on reflector, ready to resolve.
So don't recall seeing that too much on the reflector, but the question was having to do with, he has the span set to 10 kilohertz. He clicks on VFO-B to go chase someone there. And then when he goes back to VFO-A, I guess you're hitting the A/B button? Okay. Okay. And he's seeing it jump to 100 kilohertz span. Remember, the spans are saved per band, and per VFO. Now, if you double tap AB, and you really did get the double tap, it should store a 10 kilohertz span in both VFOs, but only on that band. If you change bands, you're going to have a totally different span. It remembers the span per band and per VFO. So when you tap AB to go back to VFO-A, it should never go back to 100 kilohertz. If you can repeat that and make a repeatable scenario, that's a bug they can fix, but I haven't seen that myself. And I also recommend using the quick swap macro, the AB2 command, instead of tapping the button on the screen. It's much faster to swap and it doesn't mess with all the spans. Okay.
DVR, and we record something, does it turn the compression on back, drill so forth, flatten it out, and then you move it back, or you have to turn all the compression down to the DVR?
Good question that had to do with the recording messages in the internal voice memories, the DVR. Does it turn off compression and equalization to record those? An older release did not. It was a bug. But if you're on R37 or R36, then that's fixed. You don't have to touch the compression or EQ settings. Every message you record is recorded raw, unprocessed in the DVR memories. When you play them back, that's when the processing is applied. And if you're doing to a remote, the processor settings on the remote are what is applied. So you do want to check your remote EQ. It may be different. I'll take the Rich. I wouldn't use flat on the remote. I would peak it like I showed, and then when you play back a message, it's recorded flat on your client. It'll get sent in digital form to the remote. The remote will play that audio message with the equalization setting and compression settings of the remote server. Richard.
My question goes to rule number 2.
2.
Speakers and headphones. I have macro set up to do that, and I also change the mod button to 0 when I'm not in the headphones, 55 when I'm wearing it.
Nice.
But even when I have the speakers turned off, there's faint stuff coming. It sounds like a speaker in the Elecraft. There's like little leakage in there. I hear noises and voices coming from that speaker.
Okay, so he's done a nice thing. He's not only using the macro button to toggle the speakers on and off, he's also setting the monitor to 0, which is a good idea. When you turn on the external speaker, that way you don't get feedback on the mic or hear CW. Well, I guess on CW you'd want it on, but for phone or maybe FT8 or something, you don't want to hear it. But he says that he still, even though the speaker is muted, he still hears faint noises coming from the internal speaker. Do you have an external speaker plugged into the back?
I have
2 studio monitors. Wow. Amplified? Okay. Maybe there's a little too much amplification. It doesn't surprise me that some noise inside the K4 would leak into those speakers even when the speakers were muted. So I don't have a fix for that other than, a relay to open that speaker connection or something. It'll probably make a giant pop if we put it back. I wouldn't do it that way. Maybe turn down the gain of those monitor speakers a little bit. I imagine they might not be too well shielded from RFI, and they're just getting, you could try a ferrite on the cable, a mix 31 ferrite, to see if it's RF type noises that are coming through the speakers. If you really want to mute the internal speaker permanently, just open the top cover and disconnect the cable. A lot of folks have done that to prevent the loud pop that happens when you do a firmware update or turn on the radio. There's this giant pop that comes out of the internal speaker, even if an external speaker is plugged in. The only way to really cure that is to unplug that cable. Yes?
I'm assuming that I could get access to this presentation when I get back home.
When you get back home, unless you're home tomorrow, I will have a PDF file of this presentation on my QRZ.com page. And it'll be at the top part of the presentation section if you scroll down. My QRZ.com page, N6TV, it'll go right there. Okay, questions? Yes, sorry.
Screenshot. Where'd that file save?
Where's the screenshot file saved? Good question. You have to have a USB stick plugged into the front or back of the K4. It is saved in the root directory, and you can, there's a menu setting, you can set a prefix if you want. The default is something like SC and then a timestamp. It does timestamp them with UTC, all right? The internal time clock of the radio is UTC. So you'll get a little confused if you sort your pictures by date. Oh, wow, that was tomorrow. What's this picture doing here? It's because it's putting the timestamp in the file based on UTC. Okay, do we have any more questions? Yes.
Remote own with the K4D and the K4D.
So the question is, how do you use a KPA 1500 to turn on a remote K4? With my gadget. So there's, where do you plug it in? So there's a couple of gadgets. The K-on is a device if you're not using the accessory port or you've got a simple Y cable and an aux cable or my older Y box. Plug the K-on in, and as soon as the power supply of the rig turns on, the rig will boot itself up. That's what the K-on does. Back at the first slides, I had a link to how to remote power on-off methods. There's many ways to remotely power on a K4. One method is simply to have a WISE type switch or a switch you can control by Wi-Fi or by Apple app or Amazon Alexa or something. Turn on this light switch. What's that do? That turns on AC power to your DC power supply of the K4. The K-on's plugged into the K4. As soon as that DC power supply goes on, the rig turns on. Now, when you want to turn the rig off, don't just cut the power. Send a PS0 command if you're remote. If you're remote, you program it in a macro button on the remote client. RS1, which means send it to their server, semicolon, PS0, semicolon. That means power that rig off clean, wait about 8 seconds or so, then you can disconnect the power from the remote K4 using your web app to control the AC power strip. That's one way to turn on the K4 remotely. Unlike the K4, the KPA 1500 does support wake on LAN. So if you have a PC in the shack, that PC can run the KPA 1500 remote software, turn on the KPA 1500. And the KPA 1500 has a tune jack on the back that's a key. It's like a straight key that it can close to produce a carrier for non-Elecraft radios. We're probably not using it with Elecraft radios. You can pulse that jack to ground, and it will turn on the K4 if that other end of that cable is connected to pin 8 of the accessory plug, which you can get to easily with my Y box, which breaks out the accessory plug to 4 RCA connectors. So you can actually, just turning on the KPA 1500, in most cases, there's a short 2 millisecond ground pulse on the tune jack, and all of a sudden the K4 turns on, assuming its power supply is on. So that's another way to turn on the K4 is just turn on the 1500. If you have a way to do that now with the KPA 1500 remote software, which is free, but not available on Mac, that is a way to do it. Now, the KPA 1500 utility is available for Mac, right? And it can also turn on the KPA 1500, and you can tell the KPA 1500 to toggle the tune to ground with a pulse. And that's described in more detail in that document. So that's 2 ways to power it on. And the other way is, build your own Raspberry Pi and a relay and pulse the pin to ground, all of those methods. But simplest way is to just get a $25 power outlet that you control from the internet and turn on the power supply to the K4 and it'll turn on. Okay, yes?
I sometimes use the audio recording loop, but
AF record. Yes.
then when I play it back, I'm trying to find where the station finally identified it. Not sure I understand that.
Yeah, the AF record and AF play functions built into the K4 don't work very well, frankly. It's a set of bugs that they haven't really prioritized to address yet. I'm not even sure they're fully aware of all the issues with it because they didn't fully test it. I did try to log most of those as a field tester that I could, but they're so focused on getting the zero out and HD module and all that other stuff that they're just not looking at it. My recommendation, if you want to do a lot of recording, is get a free program like Audacity. It hooks right up to the K4 USB audio codec and get the level just right. And you can record for hours if you want to. And you can jump right to anything you want on your PC screen. And a Mac, I think, what's the equivalent of a Mac software for recording audio? Somebody help me out here. Nobody? Any Mac users here? Can't think of one. Well, I'm sure it has GarageBand or whatever, one of those programs that can record audio from a sound card, and that would be the one I would recommend. Logging programs like N1MM and WinTest and DXLog.net, contest loggers, they have a way of recording every QSO you make, and that's really handy too. Okay. Oh, green shirt. Oops.
Status box that you can change to take the time and stuff. Anytime I change it to something other than the default, it seems to go back to the default when I change bands or something.
No, he's saying that the status window, he set it to maybe ID and day and time or something. He's saying the status window doesn't always stay that way, that if he restarts the K4, it goes away and it goes back to the default display. I have never seen that. How long does it take to power up your K4 when you just hit the power button? If it's more than 25 to 30 seconds, your clock battery may be bad, and that's generally might have something to do with it. But the status area, once you change it to what you want it to be, now there's some exceptions like, if you do all param, that's a screen that fills the whole screen, and of course that's going to go away. But if you were just trying to display, like I did there, time/TX, just the time and the TX info, it should not go back to the default display. Now, when you transmit, the display can change, and then when you untransmit it, it'll go back to something else, depending on what you picked. But I don't think the status display, I don't think anybody else has reported that. So be very careful to observe what you see. It always goes to the default of the date and time. It shouldn't do that. So maybe you're just not tapping the button and then terminating the menu to save it or something. What's the other weird thing going on?
If I turn on the CW decode,
Yes.
and then I switch to sideband,
Right.
a lot of times the CW decode will stay on the screen until I power the radio off and back on.
Is it showing the CW code window like all blank or just a blank spot at the bottom of the screen or shows the decode window? Well, remember there's two decode windows. He's saying that he goes to sideband mode and the text decode window is still visible. I think you have to check very carefully in that window as to whether it's for VFO-A or VFO-B, because there's two text decode windows. And if you happen to tap sub-RX text decode, and then you move your VFO-A to sideband, well, the sub-RX is still on, and it's going to still have decode on. And it'll have a green color indicating this is the sub-RX text decode. So if you tap text decode again and it's just off, it should go away, but it should not, it should automatically go away when you go to sideband. But as soon as you go to a band with CW, it's going to turn it back on. It should turn it off and on automatically. These are weird symptoms I did not see. Again, I encourage you to join the Zoom call on every Sunday at 20 Zulu if you can, and have a camera, or better yet, a video capture card so we can see exactly what's on your screen, and then we can see what's wrong. A lot of people, they don't read the screen real carefully and realize, oh, it's the BVFO text decode that I have on, and it's still in CW mode, and that's why I still have it. So that'd probably be the most likely explanation I can think of. Also, you have to check the lower right corner of the display to see if you're looking at VFO-B or Pan-B instead of Pan-A. Sometimes you're in CW mode, your VFO says I'm in sideband, but your display is set for Pan-B, which is still in CW mode, even if the subreceiver's off. So, subreceiver off. Yeah, I think you'll still get the text decode window there. Does it still scroll when you're in span mode? Is it trying to decode, or is it just kind of frozen with the text that was there?
I think we'll always turn off the radio and back on to get rid of it.
Yeah, turning the radio off and back on. There's a much faster way to do a warm boot of a K4 than turning the radio off and on. You tap function, backup, like you're going to take a backup, and then exit. I'm not going to take a backup. That restarts the display software and everything else. It also disconnects any external programs that are connected by Ethernet. But that's my recommendation, is instead of powering the radio off and on, if you really want to reset the display, tap function, hold down backup, and then there's an exit button, exit the backup, it restarts the software, and that should probably go away. But I don't think it should persist across powers, when you go to sideband mode, unless something is wrong. Could be a bug there. If I can see what you're doing, I can try to replicate it. If I can replicate it, I can get Elecraft to fix it. Yes, sir.
Is there an official service bulletin or memo variant for lock washing?
So,
I had probably a very early model K4.
uh-huh.
Not yet a problem, but it's noticeable out there.
All right. So as some folks may know, the KLPA4, the low power amplifier, the 10-watt amplifier in the K4, has been prone to some failures. And some of them in the early models were blamed on the fact that the heatsink wasn't securely bonded to the low power amplifier. People were running 10 watts key down in FT8 mode a lot, getting it real hot. The fans don't really cool the low power amplifier. So they came out with this mod that put some lock washers underneath those screw heads to hold down the KLPA4 to the heatsink a little more firmly. If you've never had a problem, like I have two early K4s, I've never had a problem with them. I'm pretty sure they don't have any lock washers. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it is a pretty easy thing to do to install those little lock washers. As far as the service bulletin goes, they don't have any official service bulletins anywhere on their website for the K4 that I'm aware of. But in the K4groups.io, there was a post by the Elecraft Tech WE6R or others who have actually taken a picture and showed you where those screws are. And in the case of Elecraft, they have little screws that have a captive lock washer instead of a separate one that can fly off and end up in the bowels of your radio. You don't want to risk that. So I would leave it alone if it's working fine. And how many have here, just show of hands, had to send their K4 back to Elecraft just to have the KLPA4 fixed? One. Just one. Poor Hank. Oh, two. Well, I thought it was more common than that, because that's where you get a skewed view of the world by watching the forum, because all you see on the forum is stuff that's not working, stuff that broke. Everybody, something broke, they want to complain on the forum right away. They want instant fix. Yeah.
K4 to K4D upgrade procedure has had for a lot more.
So Thomas NY4I is saying that when you upgrade, they add the HD module, like they've already. When you add the subreceiver, the KRX4, you're upgrading a K4 to a non-D to a K4D. When you do that, they also recommend you put in the lock washers. They made pretty strong recommendation to do it. I think they kind of overdid it on that. I don't think it'll do any harm, but I'm not convinced it fixes all the problems with the KLPA4 either. Don't set your fan speed to off. Leave the fan going. We could use a fan in here. I apologize for the heat. They told me the air conditioner is the best they can do today over here. It's cooler in the other room. Go ahead.
At our substation, we have a couple of K4s, and at the time when we lost our internet connection, we wanted to do a firmware update for the K4. Something the manual that talks about being able to do it for the USB port. Is there a procedure to have it on a USB stick? Is that in the works? Or?
Yeah, we should have asked Eric that question. The question is, can you update a K4 that has no internet connection using a USB stick? No, we can't do it. I think the factory can do it. They have a way to do it. It probably involves getting into BIOS settings of the PC and doing all the stuff they don't want users to do. The manual says, oh, you can update by USB stick. It might even be an option in the function update menu to update by USB stick. They never implemented that, and I think it's way down their list. Having the K4 connected to the internet isn't too hard if you've got Ethernet in the shack. It's obviously easy. Yeah, no way to update the K4 without an internet connection of some kind. Now, if you have a PC and a cell phone hotspot, and the PC can talk to the internet by that cell phone hotspot, and you got an Ethernet port on your PC, and you turn on Windows Internet Connection Sharing and plug a USB Ethernet cable between the K4 and your PC. Now, your K4, turn it on, it'll get an IP address from Windows Internet Connection Sharing, and it can download and update firmware. And the firmware updates aren't that big.
No, it was just like it said that in the manual, and we're not seeing the right way to do it.
Yeah. Implementation in progress, which means not happening yet. Okay, K4SV, are you in the room? Back there, come on up. He has figured out unfortunately, he doesn't have any slides, but he has figured out how to enable StarLink to work for remoting to a remote server that's on StarLink, right? Is that right, Dave?
Correct.
Dave, K4SV, take it away.
Awesome. Here, let me grab
About
this
15
guy.
minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so my layout is I live in North Carolina, and I live in Wyoming, and I live in Nashville. And I can be in any one of those places at any time. And I'm an avid DXer, and so I built a remote station in my North Carolina house. I built it in North Carolina and my Wyoming house, and I operate it from Nashville when I'm there using a K4. So how is this done? Wyoming, I have no internet service except for StarLink, which is excellent. StarLink, if you don't know by now, it's a dish that you buy that provides internet connected to satellites. I also live in the county here in North Carolina, and we have no internet worth a darn, so I also installed StarLink. I built 2 remote stations identical because I have my buddies who use the stations, and I wanted to make it very simple to use. But how do you connect up a network of all this? So here's how it goes. StarLink does not offer any kind of port steering like what you would normally have on your terrestrial or home connection. All it does is a wholesale transport of data from wherever port 80 to your device, web pages, stuff like that. So in order to make this work, we needed to install a virtual private network, which means that it is essentially a subnet of a location that is carried over StarLink, and then you have all of those types of features and functionalities. You have port steering and whatever else you would on a normal internet subnet. So we use a product called MikroTik. It's a reasonably priced router. You can put it in this VPN mode. We have W0JD, who's our IT guy that set this up. Located in Kansas City, we are on a fiber loop of, I don't know, multiple gigabits, so we have super high connectivity. So we have the ability to be on network. So for example, the VPN is hooked to the Wyoming site and the North Carolina site. And I can go on my subnet through the router in Kansas City back to Wyoming on an internal IP address. But for those of us who want to connect to our network outside of the internal network, we also have a fixed IP that you can connect from your cell phone or wherever, and it goes to Kansas City and then goes through the MikroTik routers via StarLink and pops out on the subnet in Wyoming and also in North Carolina. And it works very well. There are, of course, with any kind of satellite system, there are small dropouts, but moreover, the connection's pretty darn solid. You bring it up and make contact. So there's a couple things. Some of you that do digital only does not require another K4 as the control station. I can use a standard internet connection right on my cell phone and bring up the, I use a real VNC for the computer that controls the antennas and rotors and all that stuff. But I can also fire up WSJT or any digital program in Wyoming and operate it as if I'm there in Wyoming. So it gives you that ability too.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So this MikroTik router is a piece of hardware you install at both the server site and the client site?
That is correct.
And you plug the Ethernet cable of the K4 into this MikroTik box?
Correct.
At both ends?
That's it.
And it automatically connects. How do you get audio for WSJT through the Ethernet connection?
Well, see, that's
Because there's no USB audio codec.
That's the key. So we've tried the ability to hook the local computer to the K4, say in North Carolina, and go over the subnet to the Wyoming station. But due to the delays in the Ethernet, sometimes the WSJT is not as solid as it could be. And so that's why we rely on the remote computer to run WSJT. Then the audio is solid at that point.
So you're not running WSJT on a client PC, you're running it on the PC at the server side to get the audio?
Yeah, it's actually the one located in Wyoming, talks to the K4 locally. And then I have another computer in North Carolina which also talks to it.
Okay.
So I could bring it up on my phone right now and we could use either one of those stations.
Tom, go ahead.
Sir?
You're essentially taking, using Kansas City as a hub for all the VPNs from Wyoming, North Carolina, and Nashville.
Yeah, and
And then once you do that, it looks like you're on the same network.
exactly. Yeah, it's pretty simple all in all.
That server is supplied by TIC, you pay a fee for that. How much do these boxes cost and what's the service cost?
Good question. How much do the boxes cost? They're just about $200 each. And it's a reasonable price for what we get. You can spend more for higher cost routers, but the MikroTik does a very good job for us. Pretty good,
That
reasonable.
includes the free server access?
I'm sorry?
The $200 is a one-time fee, includes the
Yes, of
lifetime
course.
server
It's-
access?
It's a 19-inch rack. It looks just like a normal Ethernet hub.
No, I was
or
asking-
Ethernet switch.
You talked about connecting to a server. The MikroTik box takes care of that. You don't get a separate fee every month from
No,
MikroTik? Okay.
not at all. It's, you buy it from Amazon and install it once you program it.
So you had a question?
QRO. QRO.
So there's a 300 millisecond delay because of the latency in the connection.
Right, so if you were to remotely control the K4 in Wyoming using your local PC over the K4, over the network, it's about 300 milliseconds.
300 milliseconds? Okay. So that would mess up a little bit of the WSGT timing.
Yeah, it's way better performance if you use the PC in Wyoming. Sir? Yeah, so the real VNC is now a commercial remote, it's like TeamViewer, okay? And I bring up the PC that's in Wyoming and I have several apps connected to the PC. I've got my antenna switch, I got the rotor, I've got the amplifier control, and I've also got my green heron everywhere for switching all of the antenna stuff.
But if you really wanted to physically disconnect the coax for lightning,
I have a grounding position on the antenna
so you're
switch.
grounding the coax, but
Yes, and I
not-
have
not
commercial
physically disconnecting it.
commercial lightning protection on everything. Yeah. Sir? No, it costs you money. I'm just kidding. No, I'll be happy to share it with you. We have some more time.
How do they reach you?
Sorry?
How do they reach you to get a copy of your?
K4SV@QRZ.com. You can just send me an email. That would be the best.
QRZ.com email forward?
No. My email address is available on QRZ.com.
Right.
Right. Yes, sir.
For people who don't have the friend in Kansas City, they really would just need the MikroTik behind the StarLink. In your case in Wyoming, to connect back to wherever they want to talk to, and
Yeah, so since the internet connects everywhere, right, you just need a place to put the central MikroTik where it has a static IP. Could be your house. If you have a static IP, it certainly could, because then it goes to the internet through the tunnel, right, on VPN to the other MikroTik, and you're all good. Oh, sir, go ahead.
I've been in North Carolina too, in the mountains, and of course we got hit with a hurricane.
Yep.
And we were on the StarLink.
Yep.
And obviously having it close and so unstable where I live. But my question is, with the StarLink, you're not getting a static IP address at all.
You don't need it because the VPN provides you a custom connection.
Basically give you that static IP.
Right. So, for example, when you hook a computer to that router in Wyoming, it pulls an IP on the private network that we have. And then, of course, when you do port 80 or anything else, you go out to the internet out of the Kansas City area. Yeah, if you just want one, it's not hard to do that. Any other questions? All right, good deal. If you do, my email is davek4sv@yahoo.com. Send me an email. Thanks.